work in Switzerland because tax evasion simply isn't punishable in Switzerland. So you have to prove that they're laundering money. How do you do that? You have to establish that they took money from a crime that is punishable in Switzerland with at least 3 years of prison. So that's really the goal. Now, with that, we come back to our initial question, whom do we follow? We had developed a certain technique to get those customers that are really interesting for us, and I would like to share it with you. Perhaps you can use that as well. It consists of using timelines. Now, to show you that, I show you the example of 2 actual men we found in SwissLeaks. The first is Mr. Arturo del Tiempo Marquez. You see his file on the upper right corner. So with his date of birth and place of birth, we could establish very quickly that he is actually the same Del Tiempo Marquez who was sentenced for 7 years of prison because of drug trafficking. He actually moved 1,212 kilos of cocaine into Spain. So, a criminal. Now, drug trafficking obviously is a crime in Switzerland as well. So, taking money from this kind of person surely makes a case in Switzerland for money laundering, because we know he is a customer of HSBC in Geneva. Now, things change a bit if you're using timelines here. And that's what we did, and I'd like to show you. Mr. Del Tiempo Marquez has been arrested only in March 2010. Now, if we enter the data that we've got from SwissLeaks, we see that he opened his account in 1997. He withdrew lots of cash. You can't see all, I hope you see the rest. He withdrew lots of cash in 2005, more than $100,000 actually, and he was still a customer in 2006. But now comes the thing. Mr. Falciani stole his data in 2007, all of it, more than 100,000 accounts. But the problem is, we do not have any data later. So we know that Mr. Marquez was a customer at least until 2006. And we know all his behavior before, but it's still possible that the bank got rid of him after, because he was arrested only in 2010. And when we confronted the bank in Geneva, the first thing they actually told us, the same that David said, yeah, well, 2007, that's ancient history. We got rid of thousands and thousands of customers who we deem are criminals, and we are now absolutely clean. And even if there were some people before 2007, we couldn't have known that they were actually drug dealers. So if you look at this case without a timeline, just from the perspective of the name, you think you have found a good case of money laundering. In practice in Switzerland, this was actually a weak case. We did mention it, but it wasn't our lead case because we just couldn't come up with convincing evidence that the bank here really laundered money. So let me show you the second example. This is now Mr. Emmanuel Schalop from Belgium. From his date and place of birth, we quickly established that he is the same Mr. Schalop. Unfortunately, we do not have a picture. He is the same Mr. Schalop who was sentenced now this time for 4 years for trafficking blood diamonds out of Sierra Leone. He was convicted of 4 years of prison, $49 million worth of stones he took out of Sierra Leone. It's a war-torn country, and hundreds and thousands of children are being slaughtered just to mine those diamonds, so it's really a huge crime. And he was sentenced also from money laundering and also from tax fraud, so really not a nice guy. So you think taking money from this guy would now prove our case, and we know that he was with HSBC in Geneva. But once again, if we make our timeline, it's a bit earlier, it's 2008, but it's still not early enough. So when we enter his bank account relations, he also got in 97, and he also had still his account in 06. But there is a tiny gap there between 07 and 08 where the bank technically got rid of him. So we're a bit in the same position as with Marquez, but now in this case we had more information actually. because the prosecution in Belgium against Mr. Schalop said exactly that they were investigating this guy already from 2001 on. So we knew that the investigation was taking for many years. Now, chances are high that an investigation of so many years, something got out. And if something got publicly known about Mr. Schalop being a trafficker of blood diamonds, if something got out, the bank could and should have known and closed the account before. So we looked for this incident, really, and we found one. In 2001, there was a UN Security Council report where Mr. Emmanuel Schalop, with all the credentials, everything in, was cited in person, in name, as having taken blood diamonds from the rebels of Sierra Leone directly and sold them. So this is an allegation from the highest sources from the UN. It's public, it's official. So the bank, already at this point, we know the bank could and should have known that and closed the account 2001 immediately. But it's getting even better. Within, or worse, within the file, the bank file, there you have all the consultants writing their meetings they have with their customers. And the consultant of Mr. Schalop wrote at one point in 2005, well, it's a bit awkward, it's really a poor guy. He is under investigation from the Belgian authorities for trafficking blood diamonds. So not only could and should the bank knew in 2001, they really knew in 2005, that's now for a fact. But they didn't close the account. They kept on their dealings with Mr. Schalop, and he kept his $2.8 million in Geneva. Now, you would say, perfect, the case is closed. Unfortunately, this is only the first of 3 steps we have to establish to really get our case of money laundering in Geneva. The second one is you have to take a look at the laws, actually. Now, the laws change as well, and in Switzerland, a lot of relevant laws against money laundering came into effect at the end of the 90s. So that's good for us because they were in effect in 2001, so there is no problem. But if we had, and we have seen similar cases in SwissLeaks of alleged money laundering, let's say at the beginning of the 90s, that already wouldn't help us. We could establish a case of potential money laundering, but it wouldn't be a case because the bank could say, well, it's before 1999. But this thing worked out in the case of Schalop. But we had a third thing, and this proved to be the toughest one. As I told you already, to develop a case of money laundering, you have to prove that they made things, that they took money from a crime that is punishable in Switzerland with at least 3 years of prison in Switzerland by Swiss law. That rules, for instance, everything with taxes. If I could prove that he didn't pay his taxes, that's all crimes that wouldn't count as money laundering in Switzerland. So what did Mr. Schalop do? In the case of Marcus, we had drug trafficking. That's easy. That's punishable in Switzerland as well. But he actually smuggled diamonds out of Sierra Leone. Now, smuggling isn't that hard a crime. And in Switzerland, it isn't punishable with prison. So once again, we have an illegal behavior, but we haven't really money laundering. Until we came up, that's actually a source who put us on that there were actually UN sanctions in place. And these UN sanctions, that's one other point why timelines are so important, were put in motion in 2000. So in 2000, the UN put on sanctions against trafficking blood diamonds from Sierra Leone, and most importantly, the Swiss adopted it. If they hadn't, we would again not have a case of, but they have. They've adopted it in late 2000, so the sanctions were actually in place in 2001. And now we have a case of a man coming to a bank where the bank could and should have known that he's trafficking diamonds, which is a breach of sanctions, which gives prison within Switzerland with Swiss law, with several years of prison. Taking this kind of money now is an ironclad proof of money laundering. And Mr. Schalop now in the end became our lead example for our reporting on SwissLeaks. And now you can tell it's awfully complicated what we're doing here, and perhaps it's too complicated, and the Greek way is better. Well, I can show you why we actually did it and why this is important. We see that in the next picture. This is the state prosecutor of the canton of Geneva, who actually moved in HSBC with a raid. It was the only raid that actually happened within the whole Swiss League. only 4 days after the reporting, after the worldwide reporting of SwissLeaks. So he really acted, and he was the only one really from the side of the state on the whole world who really acted. And in a certain way, he could only be the only one, because he was in Geneva really. So he moved in, and there was a trial. There was a official investigation against HSBC in Switzerland going on, which was very important, because the story then, although big and great and in many countries, didn't just reside in allegations from journalists, but it got to the prosecutor as well. This is a very important thing. Now, why did he move in? And I can assure you that if we had written only about tax fraudster, he would never gotten in, because, as I told you, this just isn't something that he could prosecute. If we would have presented him with cases, with late cases, 2010 and 11, where he knew that the bank probably had thrown them already out, he wouldn't have moved in. He moved in because we have basically done the job for him. We thought like prosecutors, and we provided him with detailed material proof that the bank was laundering money. So that's the case we did in Switzerland. I want, just before I finish, one brief tip perhaps for the audience. If you're investigating banks, what you can do. As I told you, in 2007, our data stops. There is one trick, actually. You can look if the account still exists later. That's if you use IBAN codes. If you have an IBAN code of an account, the thing you can do is actually just to wire a small amount of money to this account. You can do that today. And if the account is still active, the money is actually being transferred. If it isn't active, you get it back. That's a trick we use to verify if certain accounts where the data stopped in 2007 still were active. And even if it doesn't work, it has its benefit. It's my colleague from Süddeutsche Zeitung. He wired a small amount to such an account of a suspicious individual, but the account was closed, and HSB sent the money back, but they actually sent more back than he sent it in the first place. That's from Switzerland. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Look, we have a little bit of time, because I really wanted to throw it up into questions. Do we have a microphone for the audience, and does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, I'll kick in. Sorry, there's one question here.
In the front?
Do we have a mic?
Yes, they
Yep.
have.
And if we could just ask one question at a time rather than double questions, that would actually help. And if you can also direct your question to the person here on the panel that you actually want to answer it, that'd be great.
Yes, good morning. Is this on? Okay.
And also, of course, identify yourself first. Yeah.
My name is Ayo Johnson. I'm an independent journalist in Bermuda. I'd like to ask Ms. Cabra, how did you decide which media outlets to work with?
Yes, I think that's a question for Gerard, actually.
Oh.
No, you're on the panel, you've got to answer that.
So ICIJ is by itself a network of journalists. We have, can you hear me? Is the microphone on? Yeah. We have around 200 reporters in more than 65 countries. And when we start an investigation, one of the key decisions is, who do we work with, right? So it's a decision. Marina Walker, who's the deputy director of ICIJ, always says, this is like organizing a dinner party, right? You pick the guests that you know are going to get well in the table, they're going to collaborate, they're going to share, they talk to each other, and they're not going to get into a row with each other, you know, so that the dinner party goes nicely. So it's a careful mix in every investigation, depending on what the investigation is about, between the network, the journalists within our network, the media partners we've worked with successfully before, like The Guardian or Tamedia Group, and other partners that in countries that we've identified that are important for this story, but maybe we haven't worked with anybody before. So it's a mix of these three type of groups of journalists. Because for us, but it's really every investigation, it's different. I hope that answers the question.
Any other questions? Sorry, I can't really see very well.
There are there in the back.
There's some here. Getting old.
It's hard to see with all these lights.
Yeah. Yeah, we're hearing you.
In the whole data of SwissLeaks in some countries, I mean, do you agree with this idea from transparency point of view, just to publish the whole list and maybe small information about some people, because maybe you don't know all information about all people in these lists in some countries, so maybe you give the floor to the public to participate and to give you maybe feedback about some people you don't know.
So is your question really about how do you bring the public into the investigation? Is that, and who are you directing the
by
question?
publishing the whole list of SwissLeaks in some countries, for example.
Yeah, and why didn't we publish the names? So
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can go to our Swiss reporter on that. Oliver, I mean, why? I mean, you were making the point earlier that not everyone on this list is necessarily doing anything wrong. So is it? Can you tell us how you decided who was who to publish and who not to?
Well, it's actually a very tricky question, because often you have very famous people and there the instinct goes, well, that's something interesting, we should publish. But actually in Switzerland, I'm now talking only for Switzerland, you can't do that. It's just not possible, it's just illegal. So if you publish names like that of something who isn't illegal, but you actually, in a certain way, telling that it is. Because you say, this guy now, this actor from Hollywood, he has a Swiss bank account, you're really saying that maybe something's wrong. And but if he didn't do anything wrong and he didn't commit tax fraud or something like that, you have a really big problem afterwards, because you actually named him in a pattern that tells that he did something illegal. So you have to be pretty sure about yourself. And speaking from Switzerland, we obviously have hundreds and thousands of customers there with their regular, normal bank accounts. So publishing these names of Mr. Hans Müller just alongside with Mr. Marquez, who traded 1,200 kilos of cocaine, that's not something you can do really from a legal standpoint, and after my opinion also from a moral standpoint, you have to be a bit careful there.
David, I see you nodding as well. So,
No, well, I mean, I exactly agree with Oliver. It was one of the most tricky problems that we had, and that we decided early on, for all those legal and moral reasons, we could not publish all the names. I know that's what the Greeks did, but we would have got into serious legal trouble. And some people were perfectly innocent. I mean, for example, there were people who had Swiss bank accounts who were living in Switzerland. Well, okay, if you're Swiss, it's pretty logical. People are living in Bermuda or Morocco, different story. So we really had a lot of legal headaches, and we had to go to everybody. We decided everybody we were going to name, who we got some sort of public interest justification for naming, we then had to go to them and give them the opportunity to give an explanation before we published their name. So it was a lot of hard work there.
Mara, did you want to add?
I would just want to add, in ICIJ, we believe that transparency is very important, and we try to be as transparent as possible with any data work we do, right? That's why in another investigation that we did, that it was called Offshore Leaks. It was a leak that had 260 gigabytes of information of the names of more than 100,000 offshore companies and their beneficial owners. In that case, it was corporate information that would belong to a corporate registry in regular countries, but they were tax haven companies, so they didn't have a corporate registry. In that case, the argument was different, right? Because, it's information that if it had been in the UK or in Spain or in Norway, it would have been public. So in those cases where there is also a legal argument that we could argue towards publishing of the names, we're all about publishing the names, because we weren't able to do it in this case because of what they said. And in addition, I think it's very important to remember, having a bank account in Switzerland is not illegal. The illegal thing is not to report it back to the authorities. Mm-hmm. But tax issues are secret, right? In many countries, it's actually illegal to reveal any tax information about a taxpayer, right? So it's very difficult to investigate that on a one-by-one basis. So that's why we came up with the aggregated statistical figures. But what we believe is that there are still many stories to be found, and that's why we keep working with journalists from all over the globe. When we published, if you read the story, actually it said 150 journalists, and the figure I've given you is 170 journalists, because since we published, we've worked with more than 20 journalists that actually wanted to join. They saw that their country was not represented, we had not worked with them, or that there was more to explore, and they joined after we published, and they're doing investigations on the data right now. So if you think that nobody in your country looked at the data and so on, please come and see us, and we'll try to see if we can work together, because we think that's the real power. We want more journalists to exploit this data to the last name.
Maybe up the front here.
Hi, I'm Kate McClymont from the Sydney Morning Herald, and I've worked with you on an earlier story. I was just wondering if, you know, as investigative journalists, we often come to that roadblock where you see a company in a tax haven. Has anyone cracked a code of a list of who is behind those tax havens? Have we got anyone in the Cayman Islands or Bermuda who can go and have a look on the lists in the companies? Because that's often where our investigations come to an end. We get a company name, and making the next leap as to who is behind it is defeating often. Anyone got any ideas there?
Tackle that.
I just want to give you a URL, offshoreleaks.icij.org. That's the search engine that we built with information on more than 100,000 companies from tax havens, especially the British Virgin Islands, but also Singapore and Hong Kong and others. And even though it's just 100,000 names, I think, you know, it's great because it actually connects to the real beneficial owners. So at least it's one of the resources. But the problem in tax havens, as you're saying, is that corporate registers do not exist or exist with very partial information, and they don't tell you who's behind those companies, right? So in many cases, in my experience, you have to resort to leaks. And the good thing, I think, about what we did at ICIJ is that we published all those names in these other investigations. So I hope that's a resource for you.
Let me just add one little thing. Since we published Offshore Leaks, the British government, the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, has gone around saying, we are going to introduce open registers in these offshore tax havens, because many of them are British, especially the British Virgin Islands, and they are going to declare the beneficial owners. And so far, the BVI and the Caymans have all said, well, we won't do it. So there's a possibility of political pressure there to force them to do it. And then everybody will move to other offshore jurisdictions in the Seychelles and in the Fiji and in the Pacific. But, you know, it's a start. So it may come about a bit more.
We're probably running out of time, so I probably have one more question. So anyone, the highest hand wins. Yes.
Hi, my name is Bella. My name is Bella from...
Can you put the microphone closer to your mouth?
Hello?
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, my name is Bella from Kenya, and I got a copy of that document, and I was very excited because a politician's name was in the list, and I ran to the editors and showed them, look, 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 look. Unfortunately, they brushed me off. So my question is to David, how did you handle internal challenges? Because I understand you also, The Guardian had issues, I think, from the owners. How do you handle internal challenges, and how do you revive a story such as this one? Because only one publication, a newspaper, was able to publish the story, but I still think the story is not yet dead. How do you revive it?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear because of the noise.
I think the question is really about identification. How do you make sure that it's the right person? Is that right?
No.
Sorry, how do you, am I clear now?
Yes.
How do you revive such a story? Because I tried to have it aired where I work unsuccessfully. So how do you revive such a story? Because the person who's in the list is sitting in office, in public office, is a politician. So when you get your newsroom or your media house not keen to air such a story, how do you revive it in such a way that it gets to the public?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I must be getting a bit
So
deaf.
it's I guess her question is, if you find the person in the data,
Yeah.
that then your bosses say, no, you don't want to publish. How do you convince them to publish something that may be problematic, right? That's the question.
Good question. Actually.
Well, it was a problem that we had over these philanthropists, you know, and I'll tell you that the way we dealt with it was the same way that we dealt with the bank's lawyers. We said, if you don't publish these names, somebody else will publish them from all the people in ICIJ. So you cannot take the decision not to publish this name, because all that will happen is it will become a bigger story elsewhere. And this is what I think is the beauty of the ICIJ system, that nobody can stop the material being published. No editor can stop it once you've joined in all this. And it not only gives the thing global traction, but it gives you, it empowers the journalist in that way to say, this is going to be published, so you might as well join in. Does that help?
Yes. Sorry, we're out of time, so I'm sorry, we have to finish. Look, you've been a great panel. You've been a great audience. Can we please give everyone a great big hand here? Thank you.